stories of our children getting opportunity to go to college and about mamas and daddies putting nickels and dimes and quarters together to pay tuition. It's about our stories. It's about the hardships and the pain and the suffering. It's about the protests and the marching. It's about the standing. It's about the legislation. It's about all of that. It's our story.
Witness to Grace, a testimony of favor, is a poignant, true life story that chronicles the remarkable journey of W. Franklyn Richardson. From humble and challenging beginnings to honored positions of power and global influence. Witness to Grace gives an intimate portrayal of the rise of one of the most respected religious and civil rights leaders of our time.
Good afternoon. I'm Bishop Walter Thomas, pastor of New Psalmist Baptist Church, and today I have the awesome privilege to be able to have a conversation with a friend of almost 50 years, the one and only Dr. W. Franklyn Richardson. He is undeniably one of the trendsetters and pace setters for the Black church, not just in this era, but for years. He's just written a new book and it's out and available, and I know it's going to bless your life. Reading the journey of a man who has walked in so many places from low to high can share with us insights about how God has worked in an amazing way in his life. Good afternoon, Frank. How you doing?
What's up, doctor? You looking good, man.
Well, you know, we got to do something for old people.
And we got to preserve ourselves.
Listen, you just finished Witness to Grace, a testimony of favor. You know, I think back over the years that we've known each other that go all the way back to the early 1970s.
That's right.
Interesting thing that all of our friendships have lasted so long and been so real. I remember hearing you preach at New Shiloh Baptist Church.
The old time.
Fremont Avenue in Lambert.
That's right.
And watching you until they died. And Frank, I remember you were the host of the citywide revival in Richmond. The year is 1975.
That's right.
The month is March. And you all are having the citywide revival. And Dr. Harold Carter is the preacher.
Yes.
And on that Monday night, I received a phone call from the New Psalmist Baptist Church. And if my memory holds me right, that same Monday night, you received a phone call from the Grace Church in Mount Vernon, New York.
You're right as you can be.
And I rode down to tell Dr. Carter, because remember, we're having the cell phones, and God knows we didn't have shortwave. So I rode down to tell Dr. Carter I had been called to New Psalmist Baptist Church. And you at that same time were called to grace.
That's right.
And we've been in these same locations
My Lord.
for 45 years.
My Lord, yes.
Wow. What a time. Tell me and talk to the group that's sharing with us about this long expanse of grace that has covered your life. Because you were pastor in 2 churches in Richmond.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember I would preach for you out in the woods. in Verona.
In Verona, Doc. St. James.
In Verona.
That's right. That's right.
And now God has you as one of the premier voices, and when the history of the Black church is written, your name will be etched in it. Talk about some of that grace, Frank.
Well, you know, I guess it begins in it begins in the living room of your mama's house, and where she escorted me, gave me personal escort to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And from that escort evolved my journey. not just a typical Black poor family, rich in faith, rich in love. And from that beginnings, I began to discover God and mature to understand what grace is, right? And when I speak about grace in the book, and when I speak about grace generally, it is not the narrow theological salvific notion. I'm talking about something bigger than one's salvation. I'm talking about the grace that is locked into the creation, that comes with the very fact of being a human being. The Son, Manuel Scott, I heard him preach that about the anthropological and astronomical.
I was getting ready to ask you, go back to that, because that helps shape your understanding of grace.
Yes.
Took you away from the Western theologians.
Yes.
And put you almost in a cosmology understanding of grace. Talk about that, son, because I think people need to understand that.
Yeah, actually, you see, I'm of the sense that the very fact that you participate in the human pilgrimage, you are embraced, encouched in the grace of God. All the stuff that you needed to survive, you did not purchase or buy. It was provided for you by a considerate God, right? The sun, the air, the moon, the stars, your mama. You didn't buy your mama. God was a gift from God to you. And so it is in that sense that I'm talking about grace. Grace showing up as the underlining of our human experience. And so
everywhere you look, you see it.
That's it, Doc. That's it. By the beach, the water coming and going, the moon sitting against the darkness. It's all grace. And
by God's goodness, you've been put in it.
Yes.
And it surrounds you, it fills you. And how would you say that grace, I mean, Frank, I'm looking at the time I've known you, pastoring 2 churches in Richmond, one in the city, one out town, and then going to Grace Mount Vernon. A totally different reality.
Yes.
Then going to leadership in National Baptist Convention. Then going to leadership in the global effort for freedom of African American people. Sitting in boardrooms of major corporations and having your voice heard to help direct change in America. Talk about what it's like to look back at your life.
Well, you did a good summary of the peaks, but it's not the peaks that gave me a sense of the valley. It's the pits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a sense of grace is in the pits.
Talk about that.
It's the stuff that should have got me that God didn't let get me.
I remember when your house burned.
Yeah, God, you got to
remember that?
Yeah, you know how
about revival.
Yeah, that's right.
And your house burns, and you get the sense of my family doesn't have me there, and I got to rush home to solve these problems, these pits. Talk a little bit more, Frank, because you like you said, it wasn't the mountains that made you write the book. It was the mountains cast light upon your life.
Yes.
The valleys taught you where all the ropes and the canoes were.
Right.
What did you learn in those valleys?
There's a couple places, and I start the book talking about being mad at God. It's the valley places that make you who you are, and I start the book talking about the valley. I talk about how I was standing in the National Baptist Convention frustrated and disappointed because I had invested my life in this election and the 13 years prior to being General Secretary and running for president, and to knowingly have that election snatched from you.
Yeah.
Improperly.
I was there.
All right, dishonestly.
Remember, I was representing Amnesty International.
That's right. Well, Doctor, That I stood there and I couldn't believe it. And Bill Clinton was coming through the door. He was president. He had come down there. I had a relationship with him, and he was coming to give the speech that morning. He said, "What happened, Franklin?" I said, "Well, they stole it, brother president." And Doc, it was a devastating moment, right? It was a pit moment. But you talk about the grace of God. I didn't understand what was going on. And when you go in life, we go forward looking and capturing in faith.
Right.
But you cannot see grace looking forward.
No.
You can only see grace looking back over your shoulder and seeing what God has sustained you and kept you for. So while I started out losing the convention, when I look back, I see how much the Lord let me gain beyond that, how he sustained me and used that as a stepping stone to greater opportunity. You remember Walter, one night it was a long time ago, I don't know if you remember, John Bryant, me and you, Roscoe Cooper, and Dwight Jones. And we was talking about what we wanted to be and what we were going to be. And John Bryant said he wanted to be a bishop of research. I wanted to be president of that. We all kind of sit around. And so as time went on, I became president of the Conference of National Black Churches, which is the all 9 historically Black denominations. One day, John said to me, "Rich, this is a long time later. Rich, they didn't make you president of the convention, but now you're the president of all of us." Boy, that hit me like a shockwave. That God had, if I had become president, I never would have been.
Oh, no. No.
And I looked at all that God has done since then and how he sustained me. And how is it very possible that he was keeping me from something that would have destroyed my direction? Or interrupted my pathway.
Well, let me tell you, I remember that because, like I told you, I was representing Amnesty International.
Yeah.
With all them people that were running that time. I said, I remember I spoke to one of the persons running, and I said, "I'm here for Amnesty International." Make sure that when it's all over, everybody can speak. But I tell you something I saw of the grace of God on your life. I don't think anybody knew or would know the pit that was for you without you saying it. Because in the cosmological way of thinking about grace, we only see you through the way grace allows us to. And grace changed the angle of our vision so that we couldn't see how bad you were hurting. All we could see is how strong you were surviving. I remember seeing you the day it happened. I remember watching you leave. And I remember knowing that it was hitting you. But Jimmy Woodson, my friend, says, "You don't look like what you've been through."
Yeah. You
didn't, the angle at which I could see you and everybody else could see you, God had tilted it so that we could not see what you saw. We could only see you still being W. Franklyn Richardson. And if you hadn't exposed it in your book, I promise you, nobody would know it to that depth. When you think about how grace has kept you, and what message would you give to a Black community struggling against so many odds and so much adversity? How would you use the linchpin of your theology, grace, to inspire our community to keep on, not only keep on hoping, keep on pressing? Because W. Franklyn Richardson has never quit.
Yeah. I say in the book, I've won some, I've lost some, but I've never been defeated. And that must be how we as a Black community proceed. We go on forward a step, then we go back a half step, we go forward 2 and come back 1. But we've been making progress. And so we can't get our eyes off of how far distance is the destination.
Right.
That we fail to celebrate the progress of the journey. And so we got, and as pastors, we have to lift that up. We have to keep hope alive in the people we serve. We got to help them to see, yeah, it's tough. We've been out here a long time, 400 years of systemic slavery in this country. But we cannot afford to surrender because we think we're defeated. We're not defeated. Against the backdrop of where we began, we're doing pretty good. We're making progress.
That is so true, because so many people make the mistake of judging God's action in history for a nation or for individuals the same way you judge God's action for nations.
Yes.
Nations have a longer lifespan and a longer trajectory.
Yes.
What God does for nations may take centuries.
That's right.
What he's doing, and for peoples, tribes, and it may take centuries. What he's doing in a individual's life, he does in that person's life.
That's right.
It may take African Americans to go many more years.
That's right.
To arrive. But when you look at your individual journey, you are a witness to arrival.
That's right. No question about it. No question about it. And you know, I guess the great scope of your bookends of my life are caught in this one capsule. I grew up in Philadelphia with in West Philadelphia High School. By the time I got to the 10th grade, I was aspiring to be a medical doctor. And I went to my counselor and wanted to go to college. And my counselor, a white man named Dribbin, said to me, "You are not college material." And I didn't understand that. And when I thought about it later on, I wasn't college material because they didn't prepare me to be college material. We had, in my time, social promotion.
Yeah.
If you were good, if you acted good and didn't have no trouble, you get moved to the next grade. And that was the measure of whether you were succeeding, not whether you had gained the insight that you should have in the process. So I went on, but I was still determined to get a college education. So I went to West Philadelphia Community College and flunked out. I subsequently went to my pastor and told him I wanted to preach. I gave up the idea of being a doctor because the Lord called me. And he said, "Well, you ought to go to Virginia Union." And I said, "Well, you know, I flunked out of the community college." He said, "No, you go try." I went to Virginia Union. They discovered that I had a reading problem. I couldn't read comprehensive. And when I went to Virginia Union, they said, "Well, we will give you a conditional matriculation and put you in remediation for a year. If you do well in that, you can stay." I stayed, graduated, went on to Yale, went on to earn around the world, so forth. And 35 years later, I was the chairman of the board of the university, and every degree had my signature, a conditional matriculant into the university's signature on every person's degree. Now that's grace, Doc. That's favor.
I know what you, and you know what, when you tell that story now, there's a generation who cannot even comprehend that being Black was grounds to be held back.
Yes, sir.
When as you were saying that, I remember I went to a school in our city called Baltimore Polytechnic Institute.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the best schools in our city. And we had to take at the time in the 10th grade a battery of tests. And I never forget this. I was coming from the accelerated program in the junior high. And I took it and I met with the counselor, and the counselor looked at, didn't even care about what I scored. He said, "You need to look at vocational education."
Yes.
I said, "Huh?" He said, "Yes, you need to look at vocational, not college prep." I said, "Sir, I can't do nothing vocationally." I said, "It ain't work. That ain't gonna work." I said, "I have no desire for grease and all of that. No, that ain't working."
Yes.
And wound up graduating. You gonna be a doctor. I was gonna be an economist, and the Lord called us to preaching. And what a lot of young African Americans aren't understanding is that it is only the grace of God.
Yes.
That kept us pushing.
God Almighty.
Grace was a wind, not just see, these young African Americans have wind beneath their wings.
Yes.
Grace was a wind at our back.
Back, doctor. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Pushing us
That's right.
places we couldn't go. And making us strong enough to go there. You went, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you go to South Africa when stuff was happening? Can you talk about how the grace on your life and how you saw life once you hit South Africa?
Well, it probably was before that.
Okay.
My first trip to Africa.
Okay.
Was Liberia. Now you have to understand, when I got to Virginia Union, I had never seen a Black teacher or a Black doctor.
I know what you're talking about.
It was only after I got there that my self-esteem was reinforced to look around and all the professors and all the sources of authority and the president.
Same street. I never had a Black teacher outside of elementary school by the time I hit college.
Right, right. So when I went to Africa, it was accelerated. I remember going to Liberia, and when that plane hit the ground, and subsequently to Ghana, when the plane hit the ground, and I looked up, and everything was Black. The president was Black of the country. I did not realize that the impact that being in America as a Black person had on me. It had diminished my self-esteem. And it was like a boost to my somebodyness when I go to those African countries, when you go to South Africa, when you go all over the continent, it reinforces you because you are whether we know it or not, we are paying a price for living under the burden of American racism. It has a psychological impact on us.
Now you can't drop that line and move on. You gotta tarry there for a moment.
Yes, yes. You see, being Black in America, unconsciously, you condition yourself to be tolerated and to tolerate mistreatment, low self-esteem, lack of appreciation, denial, a roof on imagination, low ceilings. All of those things impact us as African Americans. And when you go to the continent and you look up and you see what is great and promising and who we really are, it renews self-esteem. Renews self-esteem.
You never would have gotten there without all of the cosmological forces of grace. Or tendencies and experiences of grace.
Let me tell you the other manifestations of grace. Somebody said, how do you make it? Well, grace sometimes is a little abstract for some people. But what is not abstract is the grace that put outstanding mentors in my pathway who helped to shape my journey was a gift of grace.
Woo.
And everybody who makes it, whether formally or informally, they have mentors who meet them in certain junctures, and those mentors are expressions of God's grace.
Woo.
When I think of the litany of preachers and other people who met me at certain junctures and led me to certain experiences that I end up today, that's why I have a heavy burden for wanting to pass on to the next generation. Part of the drive of this book is to pass on my journey to those who come behind me, because I've benefited from those who've gone before me. And that is the kind of grace that I'm talking about. I'm talking about being able to look through the prism of grace to see God's activity and fingerprint in your life.
Isn't it unique that at a part in the journey, you realize the theological concept that was the central underpinning of your life was grace?
Yes.
But equally as momentous is that God put you in the nurturing crucible at a church called Grace.
Yeah, and that's something.
Tell me how that rings in you.
I was, Doc, let me tell you something, Doc. Somebody asked me, how did you do all those things that you've done? The single thing has been the complete surrender, and partnership of that congregation. All the things I've done, I've always viewed them as an extension of my ministry. And my congregation viewed my functioning in them as an extension of who they were. So whether I was the general secretary of the National Baptist Convention, we were the general secretary. If I was on the board of Pepsi, we on the board of Pepsi, or the board of Comcast, we on the board of Comcast, or whatever I was doing, our congregation cocooned around it. Even now today at Virginia Union, they're one of the leading churches in the whole thing. But it's because they see, and I couldn't have done it without the grace they extended to me. Because when you talk about rising mountains, I had a bad church, Doc. That's how I learned the pastor.
Listen, you know I wasn't gonna go back and dig up bones. I was gonna let them bones stay in the ground. But God gave you what would be the physical manifestation of the spiritual gift he was given.
Yes.
And
That's
showed you how they could work together.
That's a great insight, Walker. It's so true, though. It's so true.
I think about it. We in that hotel room down in Richmond, that Monday in March, or that Tuesday rather in March, 1975, talking about going to churches. You to your second, no, your third.
Yeah.
Me to my first.
Yes.
Me to my first. And you going to grace. And 45 years later, you telling the world it's grace that brought you safe thus far. Mm-hmm. Some will be confused and think it's grace for church. They won't understand it's the grace of God, but it's manifested also in that church.
That's right, Doc.
What would you say as we get near the holiday season and we're sheltered in place, we dealing with all of these new realities. I'm not gonna have, my wife and I will be home for dinner by ourselves. It'll be the first Thanksgiving in the 49 years we've known each other that we will spend this way. Mm-hmm. What revelation born out of your, part of me wants to say ubiquitous experience, would you speak to all of us in the wider set that comes out of the hope that your life is a manifestation of?
Well, I would say, at the end of the book, when I had prepared the book for release, I talked to you before that. And then the COVID came and shut down the capacity for it to print or to deliver.
Yep.
So it stopped, frozen. It was supposed to come out in April. But as I was going through the COVID, I backed up and said, now, I began to ask myself questions. Is the grace of God apparent in the pandemic? And I ended up asking questions like, could it be that God had put in our DNA, in the human DNA, the capacity that if we became too corrupt, or if the distribution of resources became too unbalanced, or the ultimate destruction of the cosmic creation were to be wiped out, that God put in the DNA something that would trigger and stop us from self-destruction? Could this pandemic be an expression of God's grace?
Yeah. Wait a minute. Oh, you listen. I hope you recorded that to add in your sermon Sunday. You better pull them pages out of the book and just preach right from the book. But those are the questions I think that are paramount in this season.
Oh, doctor.
We're caught on the process of doing everything. Zoom choirs, taping your service, how long it's going to be. But we have to wrestle with the deep questions. Deep calleth unto deep. Mm-hmm. We've got to understand, and I think you articulated marvelously, that there are bursting out almost like the crust of a volcano, lava from the hearts of individuals, burning down the slopes of their lives.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because they cannot come to grips with what was shaking on the inside. And even though we're dealing with a pandemic, I told some friends of mine, this is not the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. This is the 8 horsemen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I thought for a while, I wondered if the rapture had happened and we got left.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from so many angles. It's almost as if God said, I got to put a reset. I have got to pull the trigger on your reset.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the question will be, will we deal with the big questions, or we simply start again or start over?
And will we individually wrestle or just wait to follow?
That's right. That's right. Because God is not abandoned. God is not absent. He's not an absentee landlord of the community. He's engaged in this. Something going on, Walter. Something's going on.
My line is, I heard it years ago. This may be a surprise to us, but it ain't a surprise to God.
No.
God has purposely ordered our steps in this.
Yes, sir.
Now, whether we become wise is our choice.
That's right.
Whether we learn from it is ours. But I know every preacher has the responsibility to seek out what God is saying in this.
That's right. That's right.
And to deliver that package to the hearts and homes of saints, not just to be cut off the bone, but this is the time we got to slice it and serve it.
That's right. That's right.
We got to slice it and serve it. I'm got maybe one more question for you, Frank. As you look down the line of the highway of life, and as you see yourself moving in the will of God, and now that you look back over so many points that you stood nervously in, but now realize were the places grace put you, what's next for you? Because now, Frank, you can speak not of just what you want and want to do, but you've had enough of life to know what you have to do. What's next for you?
I think I have to condition my congregation for my transition. I think I have to pass on what I have gained to another generation of pastors and leaders. I think I have to leave the institutions to which I am currently engaged in the shape to go forward without my involvement. That's what I think my journey is now. I'm 71 years old. I've been pastoring for 51 years. I've been married for 50 years. It's at the point you cannot avoid the reality that if the God gives me another grace of 10 more years, what do I do with that? I ain't ready to go sit by the beach.
No.
I still feel I have something, have value that's a result of this long journey. So I think that's the thing I have to do.
Yeah.
I have to make sure that I'm a good steward of this long legacy of God's grace.
We are 1 year apart and same length at this church, though you've pastored longer than I. Mm-hmm. And you've always been one of my preaching heroes. I've always loved hearing you preach. I always loved hearing you preach. I've loved your excitement and your sense of you got to get this, y'all. Mm-hmm. I think I have little ways to describe. You got to get this, and I'm gonna push it till you do. I understand that sense of we've got to pass on. The line I often say about myself is, I want to leave nothing on the table.
Yes, great statement.
I don't know how much time I will have, But when I was in high school and ran cross country, the coach used to always say, you should never finish the race with something left. And I don't know how much time, we don't know how much time we have left. And people look at us when we say stuff like that because people are living to 90 and 100.
Yeah.
Think that we are just being poetic, preaching our poetry. But the truth is, we don't know.
No, we don't know, Doc.
We don't know. I mean, we have served this task long enough to know.
Yeah, we made so many trips to the cemetery, Doc.
Oh, and we know how many miles
yes
we have put on this vehicle called our body.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And we don't know when they will say this, you can't repair this car anymore.
That's right.
And so I appreciate that you would say to folk that you are aware of your next assignment,
mm-hmm.
and you're asking God to continue the grace to get it done.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Frank, I want to thank you. Now, wait a minute. We've been doing a virtual book tour. You know, this is how we do a virtual book tour.
Get together to talk.
Yes, but listen, I hope everybody will take a moment and get a copy of this book. I mean, I can't say it enough. I've known Frank before our names were household names.
Yes.
Before anybody major thought we were major.
For sure, Doc. For sure.
And to see how through all the harsh winds,
mm-hmm.
you had eagle's wings and not sparrow's wings. Mm-hmm. And you flew high, you flew hard, you flew far, and you flown long. And there ain't no dimming of your eye or your force being abated. And I just want to, as your friend, applaud you for writing this book, encourage everybody to read it, and pray. I keep praying that God keeps doing the great things in your life that he's already done, and allowing some of us to peek in through the window and just say, we know him.
Boy, I thank you, Doc. And I feel the same way about you. You have been a blessing to see you evolve into who you are today. I take ownership in that. And
I told you, babysat me when I was in kindergarten. Well, listen, you take care.
All right, buddy. God bless you, man.
Bless you, man. Bye-bye, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Witness to Grace, a testimony of favor, is available for purchase. Get your copy today from Amazon,